Hey everybody, my name is Deja and welcome back to my channel. Today I am going over my first quarter stats and favorites. So I don't know if I've really done this video before, but I've actually been super good at doing wrap-ups this year so far, so we'll see how that goes. I'm notoriously bad at wrap-ups, but I wanted to do a video where I talk about my stats for this quarter of the year and some of my favorites. I think I've included my 5 stars and like my 4.5 stars, so those are the ones that I'm going to be talking about in this video, and I'm not going to be talking too in-depth in them because I have wrap-ups on every single one of them, but I'm just going to give like a brief little boop about them. I don't know what a boop is, but that's the word that came to my head, so that's the word that I said. So far in 2023, in the first 3 months, January, February, March, I read a total of 33 books, so the average is about 11 books a month, which is phenomenal because normally the first quarter of the year is like my worst quarter notoriously, because I always have a month where I don't read any books, or I read like 2, and normally it's February or March. I'm waiting to see if it's gonna be a different month, but yeah, 11 books average per month is phenomenal for me. If we go at this rate, that means I'll read 132 books this year, which normally in the summer I read a lot more. In January I read 9 books, February I read 12, in March I also read 12, and I read 9,667 pages, and I have reread 2 books, and I had 0 DNFs, like official DNFs. So I'm actually pretty far ahead. My reading goal for this year was 100 books. I'm like 9 books ahead for my reading goal for the year, which is phenomenal. And so moving on, I've read 26 novels, 2 novellas, 1 short story collection, and 4 graphic novels / manga. So I read mostly novels, and my novellas I've only actually read 2, which is crazy. That's only 6.1%. I've read over 75% of my reading has been novels. And then moving on to format of reading, I've read 12 audiobooks, 2 ebooks, 5 physical books, and 14 hybrid, which means it's normally like an audiobook with an ebook or physical book either at the same time, or I switch back and forth. Like I'll listen to audiobook, read some physically, whatever. That means about 42.4% has been hybrid and 36.4% has been audio. And then moving on to representation, I have read almost 50% of my books had multiple things that were being represented throughout the story. And then the second biggest category is other, so anything else that's not something. So my main categories I have are like queer / LGBTQ, POC, disability, mental, religion. Then I have multiple other and none. Only 4 books have had no representation this year at all, which is about 12%. So that's actually like really good. And then I read 14 POC authors, and over 3/4 of my books, 78.8% have been traditionally published and 21.2% have been indie published. So how I acquired the books, about 1/3 of the books I physically own, and then 40% of the books I've borrowed digitally from the library. So I've physically owned 11 of the books that I read, and I've digitally borrowed 13 of the books. And then I've also read 5 ARCs this year. So I'm doing pretty good on my physically owned and my ARCs. And some of the books that I marked as physically owned, maybe I did read them hybrid with like an audiobook from the library, but if I physically own them, I marked them as physically owned. And then I had 2 books that I exclusively read from Audible / Libro, and I did not physically own them. And then I had 2 books that I borrowed from the library that I do not physically own at all. So 39.4% of my books, or 13 of the books, have been by new to me authors. Then 42.4% have been repeat authors, which is 14 books, and 6 of the books, which is 18.2%, have been debut authors. So my biggest category is authors that I read prior, but most of the books that I have read have been authors that have either been debut or new to me. For intended audience, 78.8% has been adult, which is 26 of my books. Then 15.2%, 5 books have been young adult, and then 6.1%, which is 2, have been new adult. And I haven't read any middle grade or any other age category. I feel like my adult category is like a little bit lower than it normally is actually, or maybe it was than last year, because for the Black Romantic-a-thon I actually read a lot of young adult books. Then I feel like almost all of the young adult books I read were during February. So, and then for rating, my average rating has been a 3.89, but this might fluctuate a little bit because I normally go back and change ratings. So I haven't had a 1 star or 1.5. I've had 2 2 stars, 1 2.5, 5 3 stars, 3 3.5 stars, 9 4 stars, 7 4.5 stars, and 5 5 stars. And there's 1 book that I did not rate because it is a like memoir nonfiction. So I have had a lot of like 4, 4.5, and 5 stars, but I've also had like a couple 2 stars and 3 stars. And then the last category is genre. So a third of my books have actually been horror, like 33.3%, 11 of the books, which is amazing because I feel like that is my favorite genre right now, and I think this is the only year that that's happened. I think romance for the past like 2-3 years has been my biggest category, and it is my second biggest category at 21.2%, which is 7 books, but I think that's highly attributed to the Black Romanticathon in February. And then I have thriller and contemporary both at 15.2% with 5 books, and then I've read I think like 1 sci-fi, I've read a couple fantasy, and a nonfiction. Now I'm going to get into my favorites so far this year, and I'm going to go in mostly the order that I read them. So the first favorite I have so far for this year is Our Wives Under the Sea, and this one is one that was meant for me to love. It is a horror novella, which already gives it multiple points, but it also has to do with the ocean, which is something else that I really love historically in my horror, like Into the Drowning Deep. In this one we follow a couple, and one of the wives went down into the ocean for her job, and they had no communication. They did not know when they were going to get back because they basically like got lost, her and like I think there was like 2 other people in this submarine. And so we followed that timeline in her perspective, but current day and most of the book is from the perspective of her wife after she has gotten back, and she's not exactly the same. She's a little bit different, but I think this one just has so much to say. And I actually just filmed a video where I talked about the books that I want to reread, and this is actually one of them. I did not put it on there because I already just read it this year. It was actually the first book I think I read this year, but eventually, probably like next year, this is a book that I'll definitely want to reread because this one just has so much to say, and I feel like you could definitely miss a lot of it. It's very poignant. The layers in this book are so deep that I feel like this is a book that you need to reread multiple times to really grasp everything that's being said. I just absolutely adored it, and it's queer. It was phenomenal. 10 out of 10 recommend if you love horror novellas. I will say though, Our Wives Under the Sea is very character driven, so if you are not character driven at all, I wouldn't recommend this one because I've had some friends that are not character driven, that are very plot driven, don't really care about characters, and they did not enjoy this one, but I loved it. And then the next one that I have is actually the second book that I read this year, and it's I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. This is actually one that I didn't rate because it is like a memoir nonfiction, and I've decided this year at least that I'm not going to be rating nonfiction, especially if it's like something like this where it's like somebody's life. But obviously in this, Jeanette McCurdy, she played Sam and iCarly, and we're following basically she talks a little bit more about her childhood, and obviously she was a child, but we get mostly from like the points that she started like auditioning and trying to become an actress, and specifically like her relationship to her mom. That's what it's called, I'm Glad My Mom Died. And it talks a lot about like the abuse that her mom put her through, and even after her mom died when she was a teenager, how that affected her. And she had a lot of different disorders, eating disorders and alcoholism and everything like that. And I think this just had so much and exposed so much because I grew up on iCarly. I grew up with Sam, so seeing her going through these type of things, and you know, even in that, like, it really is shown in the show that she was supposed to be like fat or big, but she really wasn't at all, and how that impacted her, and even how she barely ate, but in the show her character ate all the time, literally had a stick of butter. So I thought it was really interesting and very impactful to see like the other side of the coin. We saw one side and this is the other side, the really harsh reality. I think it's just very grounding for a lot of people. It really truly makes her seem like a real person, which she is a real person. But I think a lot of times with celebrities we can forget that they go through the same things that we go through, sometimes worse. So I really enjoyed this one. The next one I read in February, and that is What a Match by Mimi Grace. This is the second book in her Love Struck series. I have not read the first one, but I absolutely adored this one. I love the characters. This is like the only real standout that I had from Black Romanticathon. Most of them were like okay for the most part. Most of them were just like okay, but this one I absolutely just loved the character dynamics. So this is about a girl, and she is a teacher, and she recently went through a breakup, but she really wants to like date. She's starting to get a little bit older. She's in her 30s, I believe, so she like really wants to date, and her mom recommends like, why don't you try a matchmaking site? So she signs up for this matchmaking site and is like going on dates and everything like that. And also at the same time, her brother's partner in their boxing business, they're also best friends, he has this trouble with his apartment where he basically like the heat is broken, so they basically like F you, y'all have to go find somewhere else to stay for a little bit. And so he tries staying at her brother's apartment, but they're doing like renovations, so the brother asks her like, hey, can he stay with you? And neither of them are really a fan of the idea, but they eventually kind of go for it, and they start to have a romance, but she's also going on these dates with other men, and she obviously really wants somebody, but does he? And it's pretty grumpy sunshine, but there are just some like hilarious things in this. If you read it, the pumpkin patch incident was hilarious. But I love a boxer. I love a little like element like that in here. I just thought that this one had a lot of like to say about how like you don't really know somebody. You can't judge people based off like what you think. You really need to like talk to them and get to know them to see if you actually don't like them or not. And I just really love their story and their romance. I think that they had so much chemistry. Mimi Grace can really write chemistry. A lot of the other romances I read this year did not have the chemistry that I was looking for, but this one delivered. Another romance I read, I think in February or January, is Vanessa Jared's Got a Man, and this was one that I also really enjoyed. This one is also following older characters, and so the main character, she is a like not newly divorced, but you know, she got divorced in the past couple years, and she's in her 40s, and she has like 2 best friends, and they're like the singles club because they're all single and they're all in their 40s. But one day this man comes knocking on her door. It's an Asian police officer talking about, my sister is engaged now to your brother, and he's going around telling everybody that you're dead, not that you all got divorced. And he was like, the husband was like very like low-key abusive towards her, not even low-key, high-key abusive towards her. And that is something that's discussed throughout this, but I feel like this book is fairly lighthearted, and it doesn't like dive too much into like the nitty-gritty of that abuse. Like nothing like close to Kennedy Ryan, for example. It's very like, it talks about it. I feel like it talks about it well, but it doesn't dwell on it, and it doesn't get to like a super sad place ever. But he's talking about some, oh, like, I don't like this man, and he's going around saying that you're dead, but I did a background check and found out that you're not dead. So like, will you help me get my sister to not get married to him? And she doesn't want to, but then she finds out that the engagement ring that she had when she got married was from like her grandma or something, I think. And he came in, the ex-husband came in and stole it and proposed to this new girl with it, and is telling everybody that she's dead. So she finally agrees to the plan because she wants her family heirloom back, and she starts to have a romance with this police officer. And I just really loved this story. It had a lot of small town vibes actually, and I just thought it, again, it talked about some really dark things, but it talked about them really well, but it didn't dwell on them. It's very like lighthearted and fun, but it also talks about those serious topics, and it does so very well. So this one is just a really phenomenal one. I would highly recommend it if you are looking for a romance that has some diversity in it, because you know, the white romances aren't doing it anymore. Okay, they're not. This next one I read in March, and that is The Perfect Marriage by Geneva Rose. People might be a little shocked because this is not like the best book ever by any means. It is not a high quality book at all. I would not ever say that. But this one was just such a fun time. I read it so quickly. And this one we follow our main character, and her husband recently got arrested for killing a woman. But it turns out that this woman was actually his mistress, and he was cheating on her. And she is a lawyer, so she decides that she is going to defend him in the case. Evidence is pretty much like pointing towards him, but she does not believe that it was him at all, and he obviously knows that it's not him. So she's like, I'm such a good lawyer, the only one that's going to be able to help him is me. And this book goes on so many twists and turns, and it had me gasping. I was like, I had to call my mom because she actually read this book before me. I was calling her all the time like, mom, like, I can't believe this is going on. There was just so much stuff that was happening, so many plot twists, so many things added into the story. It is a little bit over the top. I feel like if you like Verity, you might like this book. If you don't like Verity, I don't think you would like this book at all. But it is just like very twisty-turny, a little over the top, domestic thriller, and it just ate down. I'm sorry. Is it the highest quality book? No. But was it super fun and fresh and like a read that got me out of a reading slump? Yeah, 100%. Then the next one is one that I read in March, and that is Chef's Kiss. This is actually a graphic novel. I actually have it back here, I think, somewhere. But I have to return it back to the library today, actually. So Chef's Kiss is a graphic novel where we follow a recent graduate, and he got his degree in English. And he's looking for jobs, but nobody's hiring him because they say, oh, you need experience. But he's like, how am I going to get experience if nobody's hiring me? So he is basically trying to go for anything at this point. He needs that money because he moved out, obviously, of college, and he's living with his 3 friends that he met in college that are all following different life paths. So like 2 of them got jobs, 1 of them is going back to college, so they're all having different things, but obviously needs to pay that rent. He's passing by this restaurant one day and sees this sign that's like, oh, like, we're hiring, no experience needed. So he's like, oh, like, this is my chance. He gets hired on this temporary basis where every week he's been getting taught by a different chef in the restaurant. I'm forgetting words. He's getting taught by a different chef in the restaurant one of their like iconic recipes, and it's like different like categories, kind of like giving Great British Bake Off. And so he has to make it and then make his own recipe and present it to this pig who is amazing, and he's like the highest tier. He's like the one that his hiring is being determined off of. If he does not impress his pig for 3 weeks in a row, he's not getting hired. And he starts to develop a crush on one of the chefs there, but obviously he doesn't know if he's gay or what. But this one was so cute. I loved the cooking chef vibes, and I love the pig. I love the side characters like his friends and then all the other chefs. I really just enjoyed the story, and it was so cute and fun and fresh. Like if you're looking for a cute graphic novel like in the vein of like Heartstopper area, I would recommend this one for sure, but it is obviously adult. This next one is Slewfoot by Brom. It's one that I recently just read for my book club. I absolutely love this one. It's perfect for like October, even like September, October, November. I feel it is the witch story that you want. If you want something that's very much like Salem witch trials type energy, I would recommend this one for sure. I've never read a book like this. Like I feel like most witchy books are like romance, or they're like witchy, paranormal, modern day, like Jennifer Body, but make it witch version. But this one is very much like Salem witch trials, like Pilgrims, like 1666 type beat, and I ate it up for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. There are some parts that are a little bit slower, but I think that this one tells such an amazing story. It follows this woman Abatha, and she lives on the outskirts of this community, but they are Puritan, so she obviously goes to church. She is definitely like an outsider because she was not originally in this group. She came from England to marry this man. One day their goat dies, and that kind of starts this whole big mess for her and her husband. It's so good. I don't want to say more than that because I feel like that's all that you need to know, because there are a lot of shocking twists and turns, and this book has pictures in it, and the pictures are done phenomenally. They're a little scary, but I just love like the horror in this. Like it had so much to say about isolation and how people are scared of things that they don't know, and instead of taking the time to like try to get to know the things that they don't know, they just let it kind of overtake them, and they can cause a lot of harm. And this one is a very like good for her revenge story in the very end. So if you like a good for her revenge story, wait to the end of this book and it's gonna eat down, okay? And so the last book I actually forgot to mention, I read this one earlier in the month in February, and that is Saga Volume 10. This is the newest volume of the Saga series. I absolutely love this series. They took like a 2-year break. In this story, we're actually getting the perspective of a woman, and we are following her parents mostly throughout the story, and she's kind of like narrating it because she is talking about her entire life since before conception. And this takes place like a very like intergalactic space. Between these two species, there is a war between like the wings and the horns. So some people have horns, some people have wings. Like if you're seen on another person's planet, like you could be killed on spot. Like it's a bad war, and she is actually the child of a horned man and a winged woman from between the two species. But we follow like a lot of different side characters, but all of them connect back to this main family. And the 9th edition like changed everything, and they just like went on hiatus. Like it was one of the most foundational changes in this whole story. It probably was. And then this one was just so different. Like it'll never be the same, but I still loved it at the same time. Like I miss this world so much. And then I just want to mention really quick that I did reread 2 books, and my favorite is obviously Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke. I love that story so much, but I didn't want to like mention them as official favorites because this is not the first time I read them. But Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke, I did read the other 2 stories because it's Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke and Other Misfortunes was recently published last year, and so it has 2 other stories in it that were not originally in the first publishing of Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke. So I read those for the first time, and I did really enjoy one of them a lot, and the other one I didn't enjoy initially at the time that much, but I actually think about it a lot, so maybe I did. I just didn't have like as much commentary as I really want from Eric LaRocca, as I feel like a lot of Eric LaRocca's other stories have, but I still really enjoyed that overall collection. And so I hope that you guys enjoyed this video of me doing like my little stats and my favorites. Let me know if this is something that y'all will like to continue to see, because I will definitely like to continue putting them out for y'all. If you made it to the end of this video, put the pumpkin emoji, because that pumpkin patch incident in What a Match, because that was hilarious. And I will see y'all in my next one. Bye everybody.